Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. We've been going through some beautiful work on the laws of charity, and there's so much in there. It's very deep and very, very practical. You can't go wrong with the materials. So let's just jump right in and see how Rabbi Schwartz is doing. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. So good to be with you again. It just looks like you and I here tonight. So we're going to turn this over to you and let you take it from here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good to be back. Hope everybody's enjoying this. I am going over this thing, and now uh, let's see. We got the page up there. You see this ID? Okay. So we are up to the Shulchan Aruch repetition of the Rambam. So that'll help us remember where we are. Just take that out to put it back where we finish off. And now we're saying lower than this is where the giver knows the identity of the recipient, but the needy person does not know from whom he is taking. So we had the top level again was helping a guy get back on his feet. You give him money, you made him a partner, or you lent him the money, whatever it is. That's the highest level. The next level is where you don't know him and he doesn't know you. So you can't call him to task and he's not embarrassed in front of you. And I think this is the third level is the giver knows the identity. You know who you gave it to, but he doesn't know. And this is like the great sages who went stealthily and threw money into the doorways of poor homes so that they knew who they were giving it to, but the people were inside the home. They just found it in their doorway. They didn't know who gave it to them. So I guess the idea is that they know that somebody knows they're poor, but they don't have to be embarrassed in front of anybody because they don't know who it is. It is fitting to act so, he continues, and it is a praiseworthy practice if those who are in charge of the charity funds are not conducting themselves properly. Because by his time, it was established that they did have charity collectors, and so the underlying message is the best to give through the charity collectors, assuming that they conduct themselves properly, to look after it well. So you give to them, and then the poor, they get from the fund, so they don't know who gave to the fund, and you don't know who the fund is giving out to. Lower than this, the next one is where the needy person is cognizant of his benefactor, so he knows to whom he owes, but the benefactor does not know him. And so he knows who helped him, but he knows that guy doesn't know who he is. So he does a feeling of embarrassment of beholding, but he doesn't have to feel bad in front of him. He can put on a face. This is like the great sages who used to bind money behind within their knapsacks and throw them on their back, allowing the poor to come and take from behind them so that they would not be embarrassed. So they don't have to make themselves known, but you know who did you the Tova. So okay, I guess that's lower is because you could expect them to help you out somehow, one way or the other, because they know who you are. Whereas the other way is they don't know who you are. So even though you know who they are, but you're not going to come to them, that would be a terrible thing. And they don't know who you are, so they can't come to you. Okay, my notes on this are the Talmudic source from Bava Bathro, the second quoted above, refers to the practices of Mar Ukva and Rabbi Abba. These practices are described in the third Talmudic source quoted above. So if you read all this together, I was just helping get it going. Mar Ukba used to put money in a box for the poor of his immediate neighborhood so that he knew to whom he gave, but they did not know he had been their benefactor. Rabbi used to go into a poor neighborhood and drop coins behind him so that the poor knew him as their benefactor, but he did not know whom he had benefited. Note B, my Rambam rates the practice of Mar Ukva higher than that of Rabbi Abba, although this preference seems absent in the Talmud. So this is Rambam on his own cognizance is prioritizing. Perhaps Rambam concluded that one approach was slightly more meritorious than the other, from the order in which they were described by the Talmud. Maybe that was his clue. Because you could argue it either way. This possibility is further examined in the notes in the following paragraphs. So I had a curiosity as to, can you really say unequivocally that one is better than the other? And it's not immediately apparent. So paragraph 11 in the Rambam, back to the Rambam, these are the last four levels. Lower than this level is one who gives it in his hand before he asks. So you go and you give him something before he even asks you. So he doesn't have to, at least he escapes the embarrassment of having to ask. Lower than this level was the one that gives after he asks. So he asked and you gave. Lower than this level is the one who gives less than is fitting, but with a gracious countenance. So he needs $100. You could have given him $100, but you only gave him 20. But you did it with a nice smile or graciously. Paragraph 14 is lower than this, is the one who gives begrudgingly. So assuming, we'll see later, I don't know what if you give exactly what he needs, but you were begrudging about it, which is, in other words, you could go back up a notch in terms of one issue, but down in terms of another. So here he's saying, as long as you got that smile in your face, and you're being gracious to him, that puts you above, even though you didn't give enough. Here is you gave it with a scowl. Okay, but all right, we'll see. So now I've got this in small print because he just repeats the words. So I'm not going to spend time. We just said them. I won't belabor that, but I'll go to the Ramah, who adds, at any rate, a person should not exhibit pride over the charity that he gives. If he does, not only will he not receive any reward, but he may even be punished for this. Notwithstanding, one who dedicates something to charity is permitted to write his name on it for the sake of a memorial, and it is fitting to do so. So you presumably, that's a little prideful. You're putting your name on it, or your parents' name, or something in honor of my child. But the people that see it can trace it back to you, and so you have kind of ownership on it. You're not using it for yourself; you gave it away, but you got a claim. So he says you shouldn't exhibit the pride, but and you could even be punished for it. But if the pride is in the form of just writing your name on it for the sake of a memorial, that's okay. And not only is it okay, but it's a good idea. And he just leaves it like that to Ramah. So my notes are, the Talmud does not enumerate 8 levels of charity, and no obvious source presents itself for the last 4 levels. In other words, the Gemara never even mentions these levels. They may be based on common sense, but then common sense suggests further permutations. For example, at what level is one who gives graciously before he is asked, but gives less than is fitting? We didn't do that. No, because he gave before he is asked. You see, the one before that was he was asked and he gave. And yeah, you see, so here he gives graciously, but and before you asked him, but he gives the noise. He sees the guy going around, so he runs over and says, "Here, let me help you out. Here's a buck." So you didn't have to ask you, but that way, he could have given maybe more. So this may be solved by assuming that each level is void of that element that places a lower status on the next level. So in other words, there's a lot of variables that can come into these scenarios. So it's something that made the next level lower. So as long as you don't have that element of it, you're still higher than it. So according to this understanding in my next paragraph, though, the first 6 levels include giving what is fitting. In chapter 7, no, so in other words, as long as you're giving what is fitting, so you're not going down. In chapter 7, paragraph 5, Emma stated there, that was in the first chapter we did, that a donation of 20% of one's wealth is an optimum performance of the commandment, while 10% is an average performance. Now, which amount would be here considered fitting. What do you mean by fitting? Is it fitting, I guess, for your wealth or fitting for what he needs? Is what I'm getting at. Indeed, why did Rambam enumerate those levels of performance separate from the ones he enumerates here? Whereas they don't exactly fit in the same scale. And I don't have a complete answer. These questions may be answered if we revise our understanding of the phrase "what is fitting." Rather than referring to the upper limit of the donation, it may instead be describing its appropriateness in terms of the situation of the donor, the donee, and the circumstance in which they meet. So you got to look at everything. In this case, the donation may be, and most likely will be, much smaller than 10% of the donor's wealth. The issue is whether it is fitting for the occasion. So, and I'm just going with, usually what happens is that, like, if you have a budget of 10%, and, let's say if you have $50,000 a year, and so you've got 5,000 set aside for charity, you can manage that, and save some money plus and have a vacation and all that. I don't know if that works today, but let's say 5,000 is your 10% budget. But somebody going around and they just had an accident, something happened, they lost some money, and they need the help. You're not going to give them $5,000. You maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000. You're not going to spend your whole amount on this one guy. Usually not. So so you're giving smaller than 10%. So is that what is fitting? No, it's you give $1,000, very fitting for the occasion because the guy just happened and he wasn't a regular, and you don't know that well, and everything goes into consideration. So this approach is consistent with the earlier comments on paragraph 7 that describe the highest level. M is not addressing here the quantities that define the scope of the commandment. This he has done in chapter 7. In this chapter, he seeks to describe the quality that defines the soul of the commandment. This he finds in the degree of compassion the donor has for the dignity and lack of shame of the donee, of the guy he's giving it to. So it's one thing that, the absolute amounts that we discussed earlier, that's the quantity. Here he's talking about the quality, the way you give it, the situation in which it's handled. The belief that one is not receiving charity allows the most dignity. And that's the highest level, where you give him a job or you set him up business and so on. Closest to this is one who knows that he's received charity, but knows also that neither he nor the donor can ever confront one another. There's no situation in which the donee can feel ashamed. So he is his most dignity. Next is he who doesn't know his benefactor, before whom he might feel shame. I don't know who he is. I mean, if I knew, I might be ashamed in front of him, but I don't know who he is. Next is he who knows his benefactor and might feel shame before him, but knows also that he need not feel shame, since the benefactor remains ignorant of his identity. He doesn't know who I am. M ends his description of this level with the words, so that they would not be embarrassed, thus supporting my analysis. So I can hang my head on that. In the last 4 cases, the pauper's humiliation is known to both parties. At the 5th level, giving before being asked, there is no other factor causing additional embarrassment. At the 6th level, asking before getting, the pauper must further demean himself, but he's not demeaned by the donor in any way, just that he needs. At the 7th level, the pauper is demeaned indirectly by the donor. What he receives is less than fitting in some manner, but this is compensated somewhat by the diplomacy of the donor. At least the appearance of dignity is preserved. He treated him nicely. At the lowest level, giving with a scowl, not even the appearance of dignity is preserved, and that's the hierarchy that's always described. It is interesting to note that M repeats here in paragraph 7. So this is I gotta pay attention here. The M repeats here in paragraph 7 of this chapter the second of the 3 verses that he quoted in the beginning of chapter 7, which was the first chapter we did in support of the positive commandment. I'll remind you that the very first paragraph when we started, he said there's a commandment to give charity, and he quoted 3 verses. Perhaps, so I'm going back to that. Perhaps he's getting close to the end, so I think he's trying to wrap it up. Perhaps we can now better explain why he felt it necessary to quote 3 verses in support of one commandment. The first verse, "You shall surely open your hand to him," was necessary to establish the quantitative scope of the commandment. You have to give. Well, the second verse was used to explore the qualitative performance of the commandment, namely, "You shall strengthen the hand of the stranger and the sojourner, and he will live among you." The third verse, "And your brother shall be sustained with you," remains unexplained. It's just more of the same. In fact, it's right after the second one, but it's a separate verse, and he quotes it separately. Perhaps this near identical phrasing with the second verse is the key. The second verse talks about the stranger and the sojourner. The third verse could be serving the purpose of extending that reference to include all of Israel, even those physically distant. Because normally you're thinking that the guy's right beside you. And now he's just, the sojourner, he live among you. And now he's talking about your brother. Your brother may live in another country. He's, families travel apart. So your brother should be staying with you. So it could be including all of Israel. In other words, all of Israel, we're all brothers, we're all family. So now we're talking about a wider scheme. This is a foreign aid in our day, and so on. With regard to verse quoting, another question could be asked. Why does M only quote the first and third of these verses, but not the second verse, when discussing the importance of redeeming captives in chapter 8, paragraph 10? So I'll remind you now, I'm not going to go back there, but in chapter 8, we had a whole big thing about separate discussion about redeeming captives and who takes priority there and who's at more risk and so on. And there he quoted the first and third verses and not the middle one. And you might have thought, just what he picked out of the hat. And so I say, rather than consider this a niggling point, that, what's the big deal? I am pleased to offer my analysis above to preempt the question. The middle verse addresses the quality of the charitable back, the restoration of dignity. This need not be measured in captive situations. If the captive is freed, dignity is restored. If not, not. There's no sliding scale on which to measure the quality, which is the subject of the second verse. Therefore, it was not quoted. It was simply, are you going to save this guy or not? So that works out well. The great sages, now continue with the paragraph 15. The great sages used to give a pruta to a needy person. A pruta is like a penny. They used to give a penny to a needy person before each prayer, and afterward would pray. For it is written, "I shall behold your face in righteousness." Now, I shall behold your face. That's you. When you pray, you're going into consider that you're going to talk to God. You're staring at him, but God doesn't have a face real face, but a presence. You're acting as if you're able to speak. You are speaking to him, but as if you recognize the person. And righteousness, the other part of the phrase, the word for righteousness is tzedakah, which is the same word for charity. So it's a play on words. Well, or really they're the same thing. The righteousness is to give charity. So we use the word for righteousness to describe the act of giving away some of your money to the poor. And so that's why, now this, I'll point out, maybe I'll discuss later in the notes, but they didn't, this was not their major exercise of charity. It was just before they were going to pray, and they would pray regularly. You have regular prayers every day. So before they would do that, they wanted to couple that with the verse that says, "I shall behold your face in righteousness," or "from within righteousness, I just gave charity, and now I'm able to look at you or address you." We have this in the Talmud, 10a and Bava Basra. Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yanai, preached as follows: "Observe that the ways of God are not like the ways of flesh and blood." How does flesh and blood act? If a man brings a present to a king, it may be accepted or it may not be accepted. And even if it is accepted, it is still doubtful whether he will be admitted to the presence of the king or not. Not so God. If a man gives but a penny to a beggar, he is deemed worthy to receive the divine presence. As it is written, I shall behold my face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness. Rabbi Eliezer used to give a coin to a poor man and straightway say a prayer, because he said, it is written, I in righteousness shall behold thy face. That's another verse. I don't know. I have to look up where it was. Sorry, but it's not the same verse. And he's saying a little different. He's saying that when he did give his regular charity, so the first one was that I'm going to pray now. Whatever happens, I'm going to pray. It's time to pray. So I want to first find, just give a penny away, just to be involved with that act before I pray, to satisfy the truth of the verse. Whereas Relezer said, no, every time I give money to the poor, I say a prayer because of this connection. In righteousness I behold thy face. Shulchan Aruch treats this like it is a good practice to give a pruta, a penny, to a needy person before each prayer, for it is written, I shall behold your face in righteousness, the same verse. He changes the Rambam a little bit. The Rambam said the great sages used to give. So he's not saying you have to. He's trying to inspire us to behave like them, to set them up as an example. Whereas Shulchan Aruch, he was a little more forthright. He also says he's not saying you have to, not saying it's necessary, but it's a good practice. You do well to do this. I was surprised that he changed the phraseology of the Rambam, because he always copies his words, and I don't know why he didn't on that particular thing. I thought just a curiosity. My notes say like this. This paragraph is undoubtedly the source for the current custom of passing around a charity box during prayer services. Many synagogues, at some point, the sexton, I guess you'd call him, we have another word called the shamus, but he'll go around with a charity box, and people will put money in the middle of prayers. Some of the big schools, big synagogues, it could take a while. He'll pass around. He better know his stuff by heart because he's got to pray too. But they go around and everybody puts, and usually just coins, there's small amounts, and it's symbolic. It does not state any new law. That's what I'm saying. It apparently seeks merely to influence by example. So my question is, why is it placed here? Why are you telling me about this now? Perhaps it is a segue to the preceding paragraph. In our notes to paragraph 4 of this chapter, we pointed out a seeming contradiction to paragraph 14. I'll remind you, paragraph 4 stated that if one gave charity with a scowl, he lost all merit for the action. And I was surprised when it said that, but that's what it said. And then paragraph 14, 10 ones later, described giving charity begrudgingly as the lowest level, but still included such an act within the definition of charity. We didn't say it's not charity. We said this is the lowest form of charity, but it's still charity. It's still performance of the mitzvah. And yet, before he said, he didn't say it wasn't charity, just that he lost all merit. So it therefore was explained that, so what I said above was that while a significant portion of the merit may be lost, it was not all lost. Well, now I say, how much merit is still retained? Having said that, how much merit do you still get? So Rambam's Talmudic source teaches us that even if one gives but the smallest coin, a pruta, penny, quickly before praying, you didn't even spend a lot of time on it. It was just, you're going to pray, so you run and give it to some guy that's standing around. Not a very heartfelt gesture. It's not like you're trying to solve his problems. It's just that he's needy, so you give him a penny. Nevertheless, it is sufficient to make him worthy of receiving the divine presence. He felt that this entitles you to go in and demand an audience, so to speak. So that's quite a bit of merit. So he could be offsetting. The fact is that when on one hand, want to tell you, give us a gal, you lose so much from that. On the other hand, there's so much there, you still have a lot left. That's how I read it. So it's so the act of charity is so powerful that there's still a lot left even when you do it all wrong. Paragraph 16. One who provides sustenance to his older children. Oh, this can become problematic. We've got to listen carefully here. One who provides sustenance to his older children, for whom he is no longer obligated to support them. And why does he do so? In order to teach the males Torah and to direct the females in the proper way so that they are not shameless. And also one who provides sustenance to his father and mother, this is within the bounds of charity. Moreover, it is a great charity, for his relatives take precedence. There are many, many questions or issues that you could raise on this paragraph, and I'm not afraid to discuss them, but I need you to come and ask, or send in an email or something. You could ask, why is the males learning Torah and the females not? They seem to be something else. And that's an issue that we can discuss that. But they're both he's no longer obligated. So let's say today, your kids are 30, no longer they're in university or whatever. I think the basic idea is they can go out and get a job and support themselves, but you would rather they still study and they still prepare themselves and so on. So you're not responsible for them anymore, but you want to give them so that they can continue to improve themselves. So he's going to say that's charity. That's within the bounds of charity. That's what he said. And also your father and mother, who are also obviously they've raised you, so they were capable. But now if they need something, so that's also within the bounds of charity. And moreover, it's a great charity for its relatives to take precedence when you have to decide who to give to. Your relatives come first, as we'll see. Whoever provides food and drink on his table to the poor and orphans, they're sort of automatically poor, he is one who calls to God and he answers him and gives him delights, as it is written, then you shall call and God will answer. That's a verse in Isaiah that talking about people that do look after the poor. Orphans are particularly poor because they feel bereft. I always remember, I don't know if I told you this story, but I had an uncle who died in his late 50s, and he had 11 children. He had quite a few children, and not his youngest, but let's say third or fourth, third youngest or fourth youngest was a boy. Mostly he had girls, but he had a boy, and the boy gets bar mitzvah, and he died so young that the boy had turned bar mitzvah after his father died. And it's a big party and it's an occasion and so on. And they lived in New York, and they came from Toronto. Like most of the family was here in Toronto, and he had moved his family to New York. He did quite well there, but he was away from the family. So when when they made the bar mitzvah, so a lot of people didn't come because it was far. It was far to travel, and it's hard. But he didn't look at it like that. He said, if my father was still alive, they would have come because they would have, felt beholden to him, that they, honored, like, he's their peer. Like this, there was no peer to call on, to call on what's old, right? So I'm just a kid. So they felt that's how he felt. I don't think it was true, but that's how he felt. That's how orphans feel, that nobody's there to look after, and they're lonely in the world. So even if there is money, he had money. They were quite well off, but you have to be sensitive to that feeling of want. And so people that do that, to look after the poor and the orphans, and give them the feeling that somebody's looking out for their best interests. So that's a person that when he calls to God, he's going to get an answer, and he's going to get it really well. Because in the verse says, and you should call and God will answer. Now there is another verse that describes this, calling to God. It's in Ashrei, it's in praise to David. Actually, we call it Ashrei, but it actually in Psalms, I think it's 150 or 145. I think 145, and it goes by the alphabet. And when it comes to the letter that stands for the number 100, it says, God is close to him. He's close to everyone who calls him. God is uh, God is close to all who call him. He's close to those who call him sincerely. Um, and that's we say that all the time. So what does that mean? God's close to those who call him. Call it, God is close. He's God's aware of everything. So obviously, in our terms, he's close. He knows. Um, but what we mean is that he's gonna react when you call. And so the verse says, yes, he will react. But when? When you call sincerely, when you're real about it. If you're real, you don't expect miracles. You're not going to win the lottery, or somebody's deathly ill and they got, please make them better. And you're asking for miracles. What have you done to deserve a miracle? And maybe this is for the best. So you really have to take a reckoning for yourself for what you're asking for, why you're asking for, what you can do with what you're asking for. That all goes into it, because God has a plan. He knows how to run a world. He's doing it for quite a while. But you have a right to ask, but you have to have something that you're going to do with it, because you can change the world and he'll help you. But you have to have a plan. You have to have at least, you're going to try and do something. So just you want to lazy, you want him to do all the work. That's not what you're there for. So that's one thing, if you're sincere. But this verse says, well, you may not have a plan. You may not what you really want to do, but you're so good. You're so good to other people that God just got to answer you. He's got to look after you. You look after other guys, he's got to look after you. Makes sense. Okay, so we're out of time, and I'm going to put in my little ZD there, and we'll come back to
Wow.
the end. Another night or two.
Wonderful explanations for sure, Rabbi. And I really love those 8 levels, and even how you unfurled, hey, there's possibly other scenarios, but you don't want to think about the lower ones. You want to be doing them from a sincere heart. I think where you close that out in the end.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff for sure.
Okay. It's
all right. So we are aiming for the same time tomorrow night, right, Rabbi?
Tomorrow, and I'll try and remember to send out a reminder a little earlier. I saw your prompt. Are we on? Yes, we were on. I'll try to send that out a little earlier just to assure everybody. Okay.
That's all right. All right. So we're on for tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. For more Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz, to a realistic map of meaning. Beautiful material on the laws of charity. Hopefully people learn to be better givers and give more often. I really even like the those that gave a pruta or a penny, as you said, before they prayed, and the purpose behind it. I mean, that you come before Hashem with a clean, make sure you're proper. I mean, it just makes sense, right? It's know who before whom you